Obtaining your starter Pokemon tends to be the first thing you need to do when starting up a new Pokemon game since, well, you need at least one Pokemon in order to battle other Pokemon, which is the whole point of the game. But have you ever wondered which game can you get your starter the fastest in, or which game do you get it the slowest in? No, you haven't? Well, I did, so let's find out. Here is the like and subscribe YouTuber plug as well as the Twitch plug since I stream Pokemon over there now. And let's start things off with Pokemon Red and Blue. This one is the most basic and straightforward of them all when it comes to picking our starters. I pick the first default names for myself and my rival to try to make it go as fast as possible, and begin walking around 30 seconds in. I head right for the grass where Oak meets us and takes us back to the lab. After chatting with him for a bit, I pick the starter closest to us, which was Charmander, and get it in 1 minute and 25 seconds. For yellow version, things start out nearly the same, except this time I name ourselves A and our rivals just A, which should technically be slightly faster since it's a bit less text to scroll across each time our names pop up. I rush to the grass, and this time we have to step a bit farther than we did in Red and Blue, and we encounter Pikachu, or Rhydon. I swear this wasn't an elaborate setup for a joke, I just accidentally picked a randomized game by accident, and it happened to be a Rhydon. After catching it, we go back to the lab, have to walk a couple of extra spaces to pick our starter compared to Red and Blue, until our rival pushes us out of the way and makes Oak give us the Pikachu at the 1 minute and 39 second mark, only 14 seconds slower than Red and Blue. For Gold and Silver, we have a bit more text starting the game up because we have to set the time, but we don't have to name our rival, which does save a little bit of time there. We can then walk right to the lab where Professor Elm talks to us for a bit and lets us pick our starter Pokemon at the 1 minute 42 second mark, which is slower than Yellow by 3 seconds. The dialogue from our mother and the professor really added up here, which tends to happen the further along we get into the series. Compared to Crystal version, we now have the option to play as a boy or a girl, which took up an extra second or so in the intro scene. And then we noticed that Professor Elm is sitting in a different position in his lab in Crystal version than Gold and Silver, making us walk a bit farther to then pick our starter Pokemon. I stopped the timer a little late by accident, but ended up with a time of 2 minutes and 8 seconds, which probably should have been closer to 2:05 or so. Still slower than Gold by about 20 seconds or so, but so far aside from Yellow version, getting the Fire type starter has been the fastest in every single game so far, since they're usually at the edge of the table closest to you. Ruby and Sapphire complicates things a bit more, since after the intro we have to wait for the truck to stop, set the clock, talk to our mom and watch TV, then head to our rival's house first before getting our starter right away. We also have to battle with our starter Pokemon to save the professor first, and once again, the Fire type is the fastest to pick. Technically, the starter isn't ours yet once we pick it here, but you can argue that it is, and that the time for Ruby and Sapphire should be 2 minutes and 42 seconds. But if we go by the time that the starter is officially given to us after defeating the Poochyena and going back to the lab, we get our starter at the 3 minute and 18 second mark, which isn't too bad. Let's check out Emerald first before going to Fire Red and Leaf Green to compare the Hoenn times a bit better. Things start off basically the same as Ruby and Sapphire this time, but May isn't immediately in her room when you go to her house, and doesn't come into her room until you interact with this Pokeball on the floor, and she talks for a bit longer than she did in Ruby and Sapphire. I did make a few missteps here and there too, which probably cost a couple of seconds, but we still have to save the professor with Torchic again and battle a Zigzagoon this time instead of a Poochyena. I should probably mention here that before the game actually starts, I also increase the text speed and turn off animations if it lets me to make it go slightly faster. This Zigzagoon took longer for us to KO than the Poochyena because it went for a growl a few times to lower our attack and also had an Oranberry. It's only a 5% chance for the specific Zigzagoon to have an Oranberry in this battle, and I've never seen this happen before, but of course it happens now when we're trying to do something as fast as possible. Despite all of this, we officially get our starter at about the 3 minute and 48 second mark, roughly 30 seconds slower than Ruby and Sapphire, although I think a few seconds could have been saved here if it wasn't for a few missteps and the weird RNG with the Zigzagoon. For Fire Red and Leaf Green, we have to sit through the control tutorial at the start first, but other than that, it's nearly identical to Red and Blue. It took us 1 minute and 50 seconds to pick our starter, which was only 25 seconds slower than Red and Blue, mainly due to that control tutorial at the start. We do, however, break the Fire type streak though, as in this game, Bulbasaur is close to the table instead of Charmander. Moving over to the Nintendo DS with Pokemon Diamond version, we have about 1 minute and 45 seconds pass before we can actually move around in the overworld. We go right to Barry's house, Thud, then venture into the grass and towards the lake where we steal a starter Pokemon to fight Starly. We pick our starter at the 4 minute and 37 second mark, but it isn't technically ours yet as it's not officially given to us yet. Turtwig was the fastest this time, giving grass types a bit of a comeback lately, but after defeating Starly, we still have to talk to our mom, walk all the way to Sand Gym Town, and have a few encounters, talk to Dawn, then talk to Professor Rowan, who finally gives us our starter Pokemon at the 8 minute and 57 second mark, which is much longer than the previous high held by Emerald version at 3 minutes and 48 seconds. If it wasn't for the encounters and if I played a bit more optimally, I can see this being lowered a little bit, but I was surprised that it took this long. Compared to Platinum version, things go by a bit quicker as our rival comes to our house first this time, and Rowan gives us our starter on Route 1 before we battle Starly. Platinum only took 5 minutes and 11 seconds to get our starter, over 3 minutes faster than Diamond and Pearl, with our starter being a grass type for the 3rd time in a row now. For Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I expected it to be about the same as Crystal version, but I forgot that we can't change our attack speed until after we talk to our mom in the game, and we have to see Lyra first, who isn't in Gold, Silver, or Crystal. This added up to take us 2 minutes and 49 seconds, about 40 seconds slower than Crystal version because of the extra dialogue. But look at that, we picked a grass type again in Chikorita, and now grass types are only 2 away from fire types in this video, while water types still have 0. And then there's just the 1 electric type because Pikachu. For Black and White, things go really quickly, as after talking to Professor Juniper in the intro sequence, Bianca and Sharon come right into our room to give us our starter. This time we go back to fire types with Tepig since it was the first one selected when we opened the briefcase, and it only took 1 minute and 50 seconds, which was the fastest time for us to pick a starter since Gold and Silver with 1 minute and 42 seconds. For Black 2 and White 2, we have a lot more dialogue with our mom, with Hugh, and then with Bianca, which costs us a lot of time, and makes it so it takes 4 minutes and 7 seconds before we actually get our starter Pokemon, another Tepig. So that's 8-3 for fire types against grass types, with of course the 1 Pikachu and 0 for water types so far. For the 3DS games now, starting with X and Y, the timer starts as soon as we pick our language, and now we have much longer intro cutscenes than before. We have to change our clothes, talk to our mom, then head towards the next town across Route 1 to pick our starter with our friends. After some chatting, we pick Fennekin at the 3 minute and 53 second mark, which is surprisingly quicker than it took in Black and White 2. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, we have a long intro cutscene similar to X and Y, and have to do the same things as Emerald version with our rival before running out to save the professor with the Torchic, the fire type starter again, and return to the lab to officially receive the Torchic at the 6 minute and 30 second mark. Emerald only took 3 minutes and 48 seconds, so that's a lot more time because of the cutscenes. In every game so far, we also got our starter in under 9 minutes, which isn't too bad, especially since most of them took less than 5 minutes. Then there's Pokemon Sun and Moon, the game infamous for all of its cutscenes, and would you look at that, we have so many cutscenes and so much dialogue between talking to the professor, saving Lily, talking to our mom, then having to see Hala and pick our starter at the 14 minute and 40 second mark, but at least grass types get on the board again, only trailing fire by 5 now. For Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, it starts out mostly the same as Sun and Moon until we leave our house and don't have Kukui barge into our house. We go up Route 1, and just before we hit the grass, the professor appears and lets us pick our starter Pokemon at the 7 minute and 26 second mark, about half the time as it took in Sun and Moon, where we pick Rowlet again and close the fire versus grass gap a little bit more, with fire types having 9 selections and grass types having 5. Moving on to the Nintendo Switch for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, we head back to Kanto and things go relatively quickly as we talk to Professor Oak in the grass at the 2 minute and 24 second mark. A Pikachu appears in the grass, and this time we catch it ourselves and immediately add it to our party at the 3 minute and 17 second mark, which is the fastest time we've had since we were on the Nintendo DS. It also means that electric types are now up 2-0 over water types despite only being an option for a starter in 2 Pokemon games, where water is an option in every other game. Now for everyone's favorite Pokemon game, Sword and Shield, we have a long intro with Chairman Rose, then have to head on over to our rival's house all the way on the other side of town. Then we have to head all the way to the next town across the first route to see Champion Leon, then finally back to Leon's house with Hop where we pick our starter Pokemon at the 8 minute and 44 second mark. Not too bad, especially considering we finally picked the water type this time, so the water type is fastest in at least one game. For Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I expected it to be nearly 1-to-1 to Diamond and Pearl because, well, you know. And aside from some very small changes, it was basically the same. The game definitely runs faster than Diamond and Pearl did, and I played a bit more optimally since I already went through this a couple of times before, to get our starter and go back to Rowan's lab at the 7 minute and 18 second mark with Turtwig again. That was about 1.5 minutes faster than Diamond and Pearl, partly because the game just runs a bit quicker. But since we have 2 games left to go through and Grass is 3 behind Fire now, Fire type wins by default as being the fastest type to pick, And I guess water still has a chance to at least tie or pass electric. For Legends Arceus, which yes, is categorized as a main or core series game, I don't make the rules, we have a pretty long intro cutscene with Arceus and don't actually get to move around in the overworld until we see the professor at the 3-minute and 30-second mark. There's a lot of games where by the 3-minute and 30-second mark, we already have our starter. We pick up our phone, find Professor Laventon again, and catch the loose starters. We don't actually get to pick one of the starters just yet, we just caught them, and I probably could have done this a little bit quicker since I lost Rowlet a couple of times. But we also have to visit the Jubilee Village and meet a few other characters. Then, after talking to Silene, we can pick our starter Rowlet at the 16-minute and 16-second mark. By far the longest time it took us to get our starter, but it didn't feel as slow as Sun and Moon or Diamond and Pearl since we were at least doing a lot more things. Aside from, the 3.5 minutes of cutscenes at the very start. Then finally, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I pick the default character and just give myself a name of a random letter as usual, talk to mom, and run outside where Clavel shows us the 3 starters at the 7-minute and 40-second mark. We don't have to pick one just yet though, as we still have to escort them over to his house, where we meet Nemona, and finally pick Quaxley at the 11-minute and 22-second mark, ending it with the water type starter, which is fitting since now it finally tied with electric types. But here is a full list of how long it took me to get my starter in every single core series game. Legends Arceus was the longest, followed by Sun and Moon, which have a decent lead over the rest of the games, with Pokemon Red and Blue being the fastest. Generally speaking, the older the game, the shorter amount of time it takes you to get your starter Pokemon on your team, with a few outliers like Diamond and Pearl, which took a pretty long time, and Black and White 1, which took not that long at all. So that answers the question that nobody asked. Thanks for watching, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, have a great rest of your day, and bye bye.